Okay, this video is kind of more of a test than anything, not so much instructional, but testing out some of the latest designs. And this one's not so much more of a, so much of a compositional test either. I was testing out the impression quality for the new stamps and just cutting out some of this this island series set. And I wanted to test out the detail. With every new release, or with every batch of designs, I'm always kind of testing out different things, testing out the capabilities, the current capabilities of the engraving process. They call it engravings, but it's really more etchings, and that's getting the quality of the dots and the details in here in these magnesium plates, and with the digital uploading these days. I guess the entire digital process, kind of getting away from analog and cameras and everything that they used to do. I don't know. You kind of have to test the boundaries of that as far as when it comes to rubber stamp masters. That's what they call the magnesium plates that you get made from your artwork for the process of making stamps. I don't know, it's always good to kind of test, where things have come, and this latest batch of designs, I really made some tight detail. I worked with a pen nib that's a little bit smaller than what I have been using. I went down one size, and I really added a lot of condensed dots into the mix, and if they don't get the engraving process down really well, each one of these little dots on here is like a little pyramid. You can get it kind of wider, you can get it kind of more narrow, but the more narrow you go, this little dot that's going to come in contact with the paper for each, point of contact has that, could potentially break down. So you want the best of both worlds. You want it to be as kind of, that little pyramid of a, raised area to be as narrow as possible, but you want the quality of the surface area of that to be as detailed and as close to the original drawing as possible. So that makes, I don't know, as I say that I'm thinking that probably doesn't make sense, but anyways, basically where you have a lot of tight little dots together, you don't want it to be, the foot of that rubber to be so wide that you're going to get basically ink puddling up in those little tiny areas right in here. You can see that all that little area, and this area is solid, then it kind of transitions down here, but where it starts transitioning through that, you want that to give a nice crisp impression. So anyways, I don't know, my engraver seems to be able to handle whatever's thrown at them, so I don't know, I'm really pleased with with what I've seen so far. So anyways, I'm just kind of playing around right here. I'm doing this is the little thing that I stamp in the video, but I don't know, it's not so much of a composition based around these islands here. I just wanted to see what each one of these would kind of look like on over the top of a lot of ink that's already been laid down in here, and I really wanted to test for the quality of that little dot work in here. And each one of these islands in here that I've done, this little series of them, are a little bit different in terms of the density of the dots. They're consistent, so they can be used together, but I wanted it to look like, I don't know, just some light is hitting them in a little bit of a different way on each one of them for slight variations. Okay, now there's a couple of them that are very similar in terms of the, how solid they are, and some of them are more kind of stippled, you know, where you can really see the dot pattern still. So anyways, I did this one right here, and I didn't really do a horizon line. So what I'm doing right here is I've just kind of folded over a piece of paper right here, and that will be my horizon for my ocean scene. I guess it could be a lake, very large lake. And we'll have these islands kind of going back into the horizon, okay? So adding that down, adding some streaks like that becomes your horizon. Of course, you're going to stamp all your islands in that area right there. You know, don't go up in here into the sky, but let's see what we can do here. Okay, I want to do kind of more of a sunset type of color scheme. Let's see if I have a clean stylus tool. I don't. So let's just use a dirty one. It didn't have too much ink from the previous color that I used on there, but let's warm this up a little bit, or a lot. Brighten it up too, I guess. This use of this yellow. Okay, just a basic yellow here. Basically, I'm just working through a transition of oranges and reds, and that first color I used was Memento Desert Sand, kind of a tan, but I don't know, you can mix and match, just go any kind of warm tones and, you know, roughly start off, you know, with your lighter tones. I didn't right there. I went into my orange before I went to my yellow, just because I thought, oh, okay, that, you know, was way too anemic, so it really needed, you know, some intensity, and the intensity is achieved using that yellow just now. This is a brilliant yellow. It's kind of more of an orangish yellow. The Marvy one, very, very bright colors. I always say this, you know, the Marvy matchables are not available in pad form anymore, but if you got a couple of the re-inkers, that would be really good to kind of incorporate in with your other brands. Other brands are, you know, they're not as intense in terms of the overall line. There might be some equally intense colors and some, you know, some color choices, but the Marvies just seem to be the brightest to me. So let's say you're going with a bunch of mementos and oranges, browns and yellows and pinks, whatever. All right, they usually don't get quite as intense. If you want that intensity, you know, I don't want things to be all intense all the time, you know, 100%. So what I'll do is I'll use all those other colors, and then you can just kind of go with a yellow or something like that, like a Marvy yellow right over the top of it, and it'll brighten up the entire color scheme from any colors from you know, other brands. Now let's say, for example, okay, I'll use the Memento here, and this Memento rich cocoa is not a very bright brown, but see, if I use it over this, it's, you know, it's a very rich and intense brown because the colors underneath are showing through. We're working with dye-based inks in this case. You don't have to use dye-based inks. A lot of people ask me, you know, do you have to use Stampscapes with, you know, glossy paper? And that's what kind of the Mood and Media series is about. You know, it's a rubber stamp is a rubber stamp. I can stamp this island on matte paper. Just, you know, you can stamp this on any paper that you would stamp something that says Merry Christmas or Happy Birthday or something like that, you know. It'll stamp, you know. Now, if people are asking about, do you have to use glossy paper to get a glossy end result? Well, then yeah. But, you know, rubber stamps are not technique or media specific, okay? Maybe like, I don't know, if you buy those old, you know, stamps that are meant for doing, you know, decorative painting on interiors, on your walls, then yeah, maybe you have to use, you know, kind of specific, you know, types of paints that are conducive to stamping on, you know, you know, a bedroom wall, but as far as paper goods, not needed. You can use anything you want. You know, you can use. Some people never use glossy paper. Some people never use dye-based inks except for their impressions. They just do all chalks or pastels. Colored pencil and those types of things will typically work better on matte papers, some papers with a little bit of tooth to them. Alright, let's test out some of these islands on this sunset, okay? See how bright that is, and there's my kind of horizon back there. Maybe I should make that horizon a little bit darker. Let me do that right here. Now that I have all these other colors laid down, I can kind of see how dark that is, and it needs a little bit more of a kind of a transition zone from sky to surface, so let's add a little bit more down there. This is using dark brown. I'll put it right here. Something like that. I wasn't going to do this long. I don't know. This is no longer really an intro to the rest of the video here, but I thought, let's get a good scene going on here. Like I said, this one's just, you know, me testing out some impressions on various areas of that background that I laid down there. See, there's a nice horizon on there. Looks like a vast ocean. I don't know, to me it is. Or something like that, a body of water. And let's see. Let's stamp this out. I wonder if I should do this one in a dark brown. Let's try this one in a dark brown. Let's go with a couple different values of these impressions instead of just working in black. And we'll see if the kind of working through different values in terms of our objects will give it a little bit more depth and distance, okay? Okay. Looks pretty good. I'm going to have to add a shadow down here. You have to add in these islands and then add a little bit of a shadow technique to it. You know, to give them kind of weight, visual weight, and opacity. Let's go with a dark brown on this one, but let's add in some black over the top of it too. Let's say that this one is closer to us, so the closer one is going to be darker. Always ink up more than you think you'll need. Okay. It's always better than kind of stamping something out and saying, oh, didn't color in that edge of it, or something like that. So you'd have to use your positioner or something like that to continue it out, or just try to do a double stamping or something. Okay, see these islands being placed in here. Oh, let's go for some really distant ones in here, maybe. Okay, let me get my smaller acrylic block. This acrylic block has been equipped with tack and peel. You can check out our information section if you have questions about different mounting methods for, or how to use your unmounted stamps. Okay, here's a real small island in the distance here, done in dark brown. The dark brown will, when it dries, it'll look a little bit lighter. They dry lighter. Of course, if you spray them, then you'll bring out kind of the intensity again, or the value a little bit more. So it'll, you know, come back a little bit in terms of the how dark it is. But let's do a real distant one too. I could use that same one again, but we have these other ones. Might as well play around with it, mix it up a little bit. I'll do this one where it's kind of breaking the, you know, the horizon a little bit, you know, so you have it kind of, you know, breaking up that just straight line right there. See, like that. Looks like a nice little harbor or something like that. All right, let's try something here. Let's put us on another island, or it could be the mainland or something like that, and let's have us looking out to sea. Okay, so why don't we do, I don't know, some pine trees or something like that, maybe. I just happen to have rocks and pines and rocks right here, so let's just use pines and rocks. Alright, I have a really wet, well, it's not, I mean, it's not wet to the touch or something like that, but it's damp, so when you're stamping kind of wet into wet, glossy paper, you know, it's best to kind of allow that to transfer, allow this ink from this, you know, current, you know, impression that you're doing to transfer into the paper or onto the paper surface. It's not so much pressure, you know, as much as it's time. You want to have good, even pressure, but allow that ink to transfer over. You don't have to squash it down or something like that. It's not about that. It's just about allowing that to transfer over, giving it a little bit of time. Yeah. I love gazing out at, you know, going to places where there's meetings of land and sea, water, you know, any type of body in water. I mean, who doesn't, you know, especially around a sunset time or something like that. But if you can't get there, you know, all the time, then, you know, we can always stamp it here, and, you know, until we can see that type of sight again. I love looking at vistas, so it hasn't, you know, I haven't really done these types of designs before, you know, where they're, you know, things of great distance, and that's the main, you know, subject matter. You know, I've done mountains or something like that that represents things, you know, 15, 20 miles away could be, or something like that, but not where it's, you know, those distant objects are, you know, really the focal point of a scene. They're usually just more of backgrounds, you know, for the most part. Well, you can do it many different ways, but yeah, look at that. That is fun stuff, and I don't know, really enjoy that type of view, an overlook. There's your $1 million view. Or if you're in some areas, maybe that's a $5 million view or something like that. Or a very expensive view at a pricey restaurant overlooking the ocean or something like that. And we've made it here on a piece of paper. Alright, now this would be kind of good too. You can add in some water textures if you want to and whatnot. I'm not going to do that. I don't know. I'm just kind of playing around with this, checking out various applications of the new stamps. Here it is with some foreground, you know. It would look good in here too. Some different foreground element maybe, where it puts us on the shore, you know, but for the most part, you know, something like this, definitely those little distant objects are really the star of the scene, you know, the focal point at least of the scene, and it's what it's really about. Let's see if we can get in here a little bit, and like I said, some texture in here would be good, and certainly some shadows. I really need to anchor that down, but I don't want to do that right now. Those, you know, those impressions are a little bit wet, and there'll be time to kind of play around in that. Let's add a little bit of a crepuscular I mean, not crepuscular, specular lighting, not spectacular lighting, specular lighting. It's light that's brighter than white. And things like photography or whatever, you know, they refer to that. It's that little shiny, you know, reflection that's coming off of things. So you can call this kind of specular lighting right there. See that light that's, you know, reflecting back at us? Right there is specular light, and it's brighter than white. And this is like white paper, right, you know, here. So that's what the white gel pen would often represent in here, although it is white, but by contrast it seems, you know, a little bit lighter on here. Okay. One of these days, I don't know, we'll play around with LEDs or something like that in the back of the, you know, back of the pieces of paper. They have those little cheap little LEDs, and maybe when we can rig it up where someone opens like a card or something like that, maybe we'll have like a little lighthouse, and that, you know, light would come on. All that type of stuff is fairly easy to do these days, and especially with the you know, little cheap little kits of you know, 100-pack of little LEDs or something like that, and little, you know, those little flat little batteries that you can use. It makes it kind of easy to do, but haven't really gotten around to it. But look at that. I mean, this is a pretty simple card, but you put that little lighting on that water surface like that, and it really makes for a kind of a nice, I don't know, feel, I guess. And this is a fairly simplistic applications of these designs right here. But here we go. You know, as far as lighting goes, you know, I left that, created that horizon, you know, just by folding over a piece of paper, you know, like that. Okay. And one of the things that I did here was, see, it kind of created two different zones. We have sky and water. And water, it's basically a light area in here, but I did break it up. I streaked across the middle, so instead of just one big area of light, I have two areas of light, okay? And that's where I've added in some of these little dots, you know, around in this area, because that's where, you know, the lighting is. And then I've kind of tapered, you know, some of these little dots out with the use of this pen. Make your edges a little bit darker, rounded the perimeter, lighter in the middle, darker on the perimeter, especially the four corners. And then you just go in and enhance, you know, the lighter areas again with a little bit of texture. And you're good to go. You can use kind of that basic, you know, you can use this lighting scheme in, you know, I don't know, I probably do that in 90% of my scenes, so it makes it look like you really know what you're doing as far as your understanding of lighting, but it's really just a simple technique, you know, of, you know, kind of dark light, dark light, dark light, dark. It's, you know, what we call in painting checkerboarding, but anyways, a little bit of anchoring down with some darker tones. You take the darker tones that you've already used on here, and you put them in the shadows, okay? So over here, you can use a little bit of oranges and browns right at the base. But I'll do that at some point in time later. I just want to kind of play around and test out the designs and test out how they are working compositionally in kind of the manner that I was thinking about when I was designing them. So, so far so good, and I'm not having to fight any type of issues when it comes to the impressions and the engravers process. The engravers really know what they're doing. I think some of them at my engravers have been doing it for, I don't know, I was reading their website, and they've been working at the same place for 30, 40 years, so it benefits us all with all that little tight detail like that, you know, in rubber stamps. So anyways, if you choose to watch the video, this, you know, extra boring kind of, you know, video, I hope you hope it doesn't put you to sleep too bad, and it's just me kind of testing the stuff out. So anyway, I think I'll spray these, and this one really needs a spray to bring out that vibrancy in there, but so far so good. I'll do a daytime type of scene too, you know, high noon or something like that with some waters or something like that, or it could be the Gulf of Mexico. I could do this in a like a turquoise, really super bright blue, light blues and greens or something like that, and you can kind of get the Sea of Cortez type of look. It's always been kind of a fantasy to go out on a sea kayak or something like that on super flat waters and whatnot. If I had a little sea kayak down here, what I would do is I would put these islands and I would position them up there so they're much, farther back in the distance. But anyways, fun stuff. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Okay, exciting times here. New stamps, new designs, new concepts, and a moment of truth. Let's see if these stamps work out as well as intended, but ideally what we want out of things is for something to work out even better than expected and intended. So we'll see how these go. Just upon visual inspection, the rubber looks exquisite. It looks, I don't know, for some reason the plates look even deeper than some previous plates. You want the deepest etch possible. You can't get it to go over a certain amount because the breakdown in quality of the dot patterns will be affected, but you can go pretty deep. And the deeper the rubber etching, the higher the raised surface of the rubber stamp, so the higher that is, you don't have to cut quite as closely to the image. I cut pretty closely anyways, but you don't have to go this close. But the deeper the higher the rubber, you don't have to get quite as much in there, and there's just less of a chance of overstamping. So cutting out all my little islands here. I don't know, I've thought about doing these little islands in the past, but I just haven't gotten around to it. It's a pretty simple composition in terms of drawing these, but the execution to get the forms right was a little bit tricky. It's always tricky to see when you're drawing in volumes. It's always easy to see an outline of an image, and that's what a lot of stamps are out there these days. They're kind of outlines that have been filled in, but in scenic stamping, you want things to read as volumes. You want them to look three-dimensional, so you have to kind of really understand the forms, and that's where, I don't know, I got to kind of get in the spirit of it and kind of figure out the geography of a certain area, an image, and get the textures down right, because that's what it's really all about, is textures. And textures, it's always good to give your designs the right texture for that given volume or mass. You don't want things to look the same, be it, light wavy grass or, hard granite, wood. It's always a tricky one, wood, with all the wood grain and everything like that. And how it wears living, trees and lumber that's been sitting out looks completely different. But alright, so what do we have here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I had a little bit of space, so I made my little canoe, not canoe, but sailboat, really small. The other one's about this big in height, so this one's about a 50% thing, but something like that would go really well with kind of these little islands in the back. Plus I had room on the plate, so I added it in there. Okay, now I just want to test this out in a really simple composition, and I'll see if my original concept for these types of images works as intended or hoped for or whatnot. Let me just get some kind of general background going. Okay, I'm thinking about sunsets, I'm thinking about streaks in the water, you know, showing those kind of striations of a body of water, a lake or ocean. I'll be looking for several things. I want to see kind of impressions and the line quality. Did I get the scans right and the line weight down of the imagery? Drawing's only kind of half of the process. When you're kind of making things and manufacturing them into stamps, there's different types of considerations you have to think about. You have to think about all the generations away from the initial drawing that the impression is going to be. So you have to go through the engraving, the molding process, the pressing of the rubber, and then inevitably the impressions that someone is going to be making with these stamps. So you have to think about kind of the line weight in relation to the type of imagery you're working with. So if you have something that's linear, it's pretty easy, but when you're talking about a tonal image with a lot of different condensed dots and solid areas, you want to make sure that you haven't, you know, that you've sized the stamp well in relation to, you know, like specifically if you're doing a reduction of an image of the original, which I like to do a little bit, just so that when you reduce it a little bit, it kind of refines everything like that, and it condenses things even more. So, but you can't reduce it so much where the if you have some really thin lines or dots that they disappear. So all kinds of little factors, and of course, when we're using a nice wet, juicy pad, if it's used pad, you know, or a pad that's new or it's been re-inked, you want to make sure that it stamps, you know, things stamp out and don't blur and puddle up in the details. So there's all kinds of little considerations like that. And then you just have to kind of decide on what to go with, you know. You want to go with a kind of a scan and artwork that's going to be the most useful and general with all of the different media that people might use that stamp with. So different brands of things, different viscosities. It's a little bit technical, but I don't know. There's a decent tolerance, you know, with all this. So. But you want to make sure that you get it right. Okay, and just kind of putting in some sunset streaks in here. I've kind of imagined these kind of a dusk till dawn type of thing with these images. I've drawn these islands kind of solid to give them a nice strong silhouette, and so that they stand up against the background of some really dramatic skies really well. You get all kinds of different things going on in the background, and I want these images to, you know, to stand up to that. Alright, so I'm just going through this kind of a color transition swatch of warm tones. Yellows, golds, oranges, reds. I'll use some brown in here too. Okay, I used that, but I think I want to go back with a little bit more yellow. It's getting a little bit reddish, you know, of course, because I've gone over it with red, but I want that gold and kind of warmth to resonate, so I'm going to use a different yellow. Here I use the just the basic number 5 Marvy yellow, and this one is a brilliant yellow. It's a little bit more orangey yellow, a little bit darker. So it's kind of just warming things up a little bit. You can look a little bit more brilliant, coming into the center area a little bit more. getting a really good saturation on the perimeter. Okay. This is a cherry, yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't think it was the crimson. Cherry has a little bit of a slightly darker kind of plum, tinge of plum red in it than crimson red. Okay, speaking of that, here's number 64 plum. You can use any brand of inks. You don't have to go with Marvies. Marvies are just very brilliant. Some others are pretty saturated too and rich, but Marvie's one of the kind of more intense ones. Not that you always want intense. Sometimes I want a little bit more mellow, and that's when I have to change manufacturers, because Marvie is just really, really intense in terms of the relative brightness of all, just about all their colors. They're just super bright. They certainly do get your attention. Okay, this is going with brown. It's kind of mellowing things out. Actually, this is the dark brown. Switch my tip around. This old tip is getting very old. Starting to delaminate a little bit. But that being said, this tip could be 15 years old, so I'll take that as far as my tools go, especially when it comes to just a sponge tip, That's a really good lifespan for something like that. I'm not scrubbing on here, I'm kind of pulling in one direction, so when I'm going on the other side, I flip my card around. Okay, going with dark brown. Okay, looks pretty good. Let me go with black. Pause. Okay, I have my black pad here. I always kind of end up with black if that is going to be the color that I stamp my images in. On something like this, I might use black. I might use, well, I'll use black, but I might use a dark brown too for some of the more distant islands in this island chain that I'm depicting. I might be pausing this video. There's a sleepover going on in the house, and then the kids just made their way downstairs, so things tend to get a little bit crazy. And my studio here is not soundproof. Okay, that's coming along nicely. Kind of, we'll have to decide what side's up and what side's down. Doesn't look like it really matters. Fairly symmetrical, or I don't know. Maybe I'll make one of them kind of the sky a little bit darker, maybe. So let's go with something like that. I might put a horizon line in there as well later, but well, let's just see how it goes. It's only my first time using these, so let's see how it goes. Alright. I'll need a fairly large acrylic block here. And I'll just use my large one. This is a really big one. I have my tack and peel on it If you don't know what that is, you can look at our information section and look up the information on unmounted stamps, but the Tack and Peel just allows you to do a temporary mount on your acrylic blocks. I think some people have actually used Tack and Peel with things like a Misty or other types of positioners. You can do these islands in multiple tones. Maybe there's a light hitting it from a certain direction or something like that, but I'm just going to do mine in black. And in the design itself, I have made tonal changes, so there will be some variation in some of them. Some of them are a little bit more solid than others. Some of them are a little bit more varied in terms of the patterns you can see on it. Okay. Okay, looks good. I'm looking at all the little details in there. It wasn't too long that I drew these two, so I'm thinking about all those little dots that it took to do that, and all the little forms. I'm looking at the kind of the canyons within that piece and seeing how they stamp out, and they look really good. I don't have any ink puddling up. I have a nice crisp impression. Okay. These islands can go either however way you want them. You can have some more distant ones in the back. Someone's playing the drums, so I'm going to pause this right now and I'll save you the challenge of listening to me through that. Okay, I've requested a pause on the laying down of the beats for 15 minutes or so. I always let the kids just do whatever they want. But in the spirit of this video, we have a 15-minute hiatus of the drum playing. Okay, now you can place these anywhere you want. I mean, you can have the smaller ones up front, you can have small, large, you know what I mean? I mean, the smaller islands do not have to be in the distance. I mean, you certainly could, but, the nature of, those types of formations, you can have, things anywhere. It just depends on how much of these formations are, sticking out of the sea, and there's no, definitive pattern as far as that goes. So, kind of one of the more solid ones right there. Let's try a small one here. Maybe something like that. You can have these. You can have these in the background too for something like this. You can be on one of the islands looking out at these, or this could be like the way these are drawn. Something like this could be looking down at these set of islands from a plane or something like that. So it really just depends on what you put on the foreground here. If you put any foreground in there at all, you can do it however way you want. Okay. Alright, looking good. Let's see. Kind of the way you kind of figure out which what's the bottom and what's the top. You can see these little dots down here. That's the shadow. So those are always the bottom of it. You can see it kind of right here. There's little see those little dot patterns down here. That's the base of it. If you get confused So I've put that little bit of shadow texture down there. Okay, this is an island that has this little jutting out part. Let's put this around, maybe up here to the side. Okay, just like that. This would be really good with a saying down here, you know, some word stamp, some quote, something like that. It's kind of like the Great Horizon. Oh, let's see. There's a couple different things. Here's this other one that's very solid, and I think I called it foreground or something like that. You can have this down here like you're kind of above things looking down, but this one's very close to you. And here's this other hillside right here. This grassy kind of knoll thing. It could be snow or something like that too, but this could be something right here where you're actually on this island looking at it, you know, out to sea. So kinds of possibilities here. Maybe I'll do this one again. I'll use this one. Size, the scale of it. This is always the type of thing that I loved looking at when I'm, you know, like on a plane or something like that, seeing things from, you know, different angles, like in the Sound up in Seattle, Puget Sound or whatever. I love being in Maine, in Acadia, looking out and sea, and kind of always looking and wondering what it would be like to be on one of those distant islands out that way. Alright, what a tiny little stamp here. This little sailboat. Let's see, where do I want to be? Down here, maybe? Actually, this sailboat's really too big for this scene right here. I would put this down here, like in the foreground, you know. I don't know, it can go there, but what the heck. Let's just put it down there, who cares? Beautiful. God. Not a statement on my design, but a statement on kind of just the technical aspect of engravers. You know, it's really amazing what engravers, the detail that they can get into their magnesium engravings. It used to be not too long ago where we would always submit our artwork on just a hard copy, you know, paste up. And now it's all just, you know, a digital upload, so you can just use the, you know, much more detailed artwork of the original files. Scans, you know, actually we didn't even used to do scanning, you know, it used to be just like Xerox's copies, high definition copies, and then you would have to play around with the exposure on those copy machines to get things right. Ah, boy, that was so crazy. And then copying things out and pasting them on. But nowadays, you know, you just get much more detailed. Okay, now I'm just adding in some anchoring shadows here. I thought I might do that a little bit later, but that black ink is dried up just fine, so nothing is blurring. So that's working out great. And let's go back to the dark brown here and anchor them down a little bit more. What this does is that adding these shadows really gives your imagery mass, and volume, and opacity, and it gives them visual weight by doing that. So objects don't seemingly just, they're not just kind of floating in an open area. So you just go back to your color scheme and you're kind of utilize those darker tones from that same color scheme for your shadows in the shadow areas. Go to black, make things look even more dramatic, hopefully, with some deeper shadows. The darker you make some areas on your scene, be it shadows or whatnot, shadows are the perfect opportunity for it though. But the lighter areas are going to seem by contrast. So we're not working with light in scenes and white paper and stamping, but we're working with contrast. So the darker you make certain areas, the lighter other areas will seem. So what we're doing is we're lighting it up here by darkening the perimeter, or the shadows, and the perimeter too. I like to definitely darken the four corners to give it kind of a nice vignette. Alright, so there we have it. Look really dramatic. I just wanted to use my new stamps to test them out, but can you imagine the background with something like this in here? Alright, sunset, a nice dramatic distant overview of the inlet, the bay, whatever you might say. Could be fresh water, could be the ocean. I'll try it in some blues sometime too. And let me see, I think there's a couple designs that I need to do. I'll add that kind of knoll here or something like that. Wouldn't that be spectacular to stamp out something like that and have like a little figure on top of it, someone on horseback looking out of that bay or something like that, and to enjoy the view with us. But a little sailboat down there. I don't know, it changes the scale of these and it says these are much smaller, in relation, but having some kind of focal point like that looks pretty good. Alright, test number 1. I can't wait to try out these other sheets here. I have 4 different sets here that will be out in sheet sets, and the rest of them will be a la carte, but this one's the bird one right here. Look at all these birds. Can you imagine this sunset thing right here with these birds kind of flying against it, or like a moonlit night too, and kind of the canine sheet right here with a bunch of wolves. Kind of picture these wolves running at midnight or something like that. So anyways, first test looks pretty good. I'll add a few little touches in here to kind of enhance it with some I don't know, specular light and whatnot, but that is my test for now. I like what I see, and I hope you like the video, and I hope you like the scene. First tests there, so a lot of things to learn about it myself. So you go into it with a certain concept of how things can be used, but inevitably there's a lot more applications that you can use with designs as they reveal themselves to you over the course of several tests and samples done with them. So Fun stuff. Always exploring new stamps. And, yeah, I like what I see in the impressions.